What if the person who saved your life was someone you had called worthless? This is what happened to Marcus Sterling, and it changed everything he thought he knew about value, courage, and what it truly means to serve. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the story. Marcus Sterling sat in his leather chair on the 45th floor of Sterling Industries, reviewing resumes with the cold efficiency of a machine sorting defective parts. At 42, he had built a $3.2 billion empire in defense contracting by being ruthlessly selective about everything: his investments, his employees, his associations, and especially his prejudices. Marcus believed that success was a choice, failure was a character flaw, and people's circumstances were always their own fault. He had no patience for sob stories, second chances, or what he called charity cases masquerading as job applicants. That Tuesday morning in November, his head of human resources, Jennifer Walsh, entered his office with a stack of applications for their new security division. "Sir, we have some strong candidates for the security manager position," Jennifer said, placing the files on his desk. Marcus flipped through them dismissively. "Harvard MBA, former FBI, corporate security experience. This one looks promising. What about the others?" "Well, there's Sarah Wilson. She has extensive military experience, special operations training, and exemplary service records from 3 tours in Afghanistan. Her references are outstanding, and she has all the qualifications we're looking for." Marcus paused when he saw Sarah's photo, a woman in her late 30s with short brown hair and intelligent eyes, but there was something in her application that made him frown. "Current address?" Marcus asked. Jennifer hesitated. "She's between permanent addresses at the moment. She's staying at the Veterans Transitional Housing Facility downtown." Marcus's expression hardened. "She's homeless. Temporarily. She's been dealing with some challenges since returning from her last deployment, but her military record is impeccable. She has medals for valor, commendations for leadership under fire, and her commanding officers describe her as one of the finest soldiers they've ever worked with." "Jennifer," Marcus said, closing the file without reading further, "I don't care if she single-handedly won the war in Afghanistan. Sterling Industries does not hire charity cases. We maintain professional standards here. I will not have homeless people wandering around our facilities, potentially stealing, creating liability issues, or bringing their personal problems into our workplace. Sir, with all due respect, she served our country for 8 years. She has PTSD from combat trauma, which is a service-connected disability, not a character flaw." Marcus stood up and walked to his window, looking down at the city below. "Jennifer, let me explain something to you about the real world. People make choices. She chose to join the military, and now she's dealing with the consequences of that choice. I chose to build a business empire, and I'm dealing with the rewards of my choice. I don't owe her anything because she made poor life decisions." "She didn't make poor life decisions, sir. She made sacrificial ones. For all of us." Marcus turned back to Jennifer with the cold stare that had intimidated countless business rivals. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, sir. I'm just suggesting we might want to consider." "The answer is no, absolutely not. And Jennifer, I don't want to see any more applications from people who can't even maintain a permanent address. Screen them out before they get to my desk." Jennifer gathered the files, her disappointment evident. "Yes, sir." After she left, Marcus returned to his work without a second thought about Sarah Wilson. In his mind, he had dodged a bullet by avoiding a potentially problematic employee. He had no way of knowing that in 6 months, that same woman would be the only thing standing between him and death in the Alaskan wilderness. 6 months later, Marcus was preparing for one of his regular trips to inspect Sterling Industries' military contracts in Alaska. The company had several defense projects in the region, and Marcus made quarterly visits to ensure everything was running according to his exacting standards. His private jet, a Gulfstream G650 worth $70 million, was fueled and ready on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport. Marcus loved these trips not just for business, but because they reminded him of his success. Flying in luxury while conducting business worth hundreds of millions of dollars was the ultimate symbol of his achievement. Mr. Sterling, his pilot, Captain Rodriguez, approached him as he boarded the aircraft. "Weather reports are showing some potential turbulence over the Rockies, but we should be fine. Flight time to Anchorage will be about 7 hours. "Good," Marcus replied, settling into his leather seat and opening his laptop. "I have calls to make anyway." The flight started smoothly, with Marcus conducting video conferences and reviewing contracts while cruising at 41,000 feet. He was in the middle of a heated negotiation with Pentagon procurement officers when the turbulence began. At first, it was just minor bumps that Marcus barely noticed, but as they flew over the Canadian Rockies, the weather deteriorated rapidly. The jet began shaking violently, and Marcus heard the engines struggling against powerful winds. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, "we're experiencing some severe weather. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Marcus wasn't concerned. He had flown through bad weather before, and his pilots were experienced professionals. He continued his conference call, raising his voice over the increasing noise. But then something went catastrophically wrong. A massive downdraft caught the aircraft just as they were passing over a particularly violent storm system. The jet dropped several thousand feet in seconds, and Marcus felt his stomach lurch as everything not secured went flying around the cabin. "Mayday, mayday," he heard Captain Rodriguez saying over the radio. "This is Gulfstream November 749 Charlie. We've lost our starboard engine and have structural damage. We're going down." Marcus felt a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. All his wealth, all his power, all his carefully constructed life was meaningless at 35,000 feet with a failing aircraft. The next few minutes were a blur of emergency procedures, desperate radio calls, and the sickening sensation of falling. Marcus gripped his armrests so tightly, his knuckles went white as the pilots fought to control the aircraft. "Sir," Captain Rodriguez called back to him, "we're going to attempt an emergency landing. There's a small clearing about 50 miles northeast of Fairbanks. It's going to be rough." Rough was an understatement. The jet hit the frozen ground at nearly 200 miles per hour, bounced twice, and skidded across the snow-covered terrain before slamming into a stand of pine trees. The impact threw Marcus against his seatbelt with bone-jarring force, and then everything went black. Marcus regained consciousness to the smell of smoke, the sound of creaking metal, and a pain in his left leg that made him gasp. The luxury cabin of his jet was destroyed, seats torn from their moorings, windows shattered, personal belongings scattered everywhere. "Captain Rodriguez?" Marcus called out, his voice hoarse. "Captain?" There was no response. Marcus tried to move and immediately regretted it. His left leg was trapped under a piece of twisted metal, and he could see blood seeping through his pants. His head was pounding, and he felt dizzy and nauseous. Panic began setting in as Marcus realized the full scope of his situation. He was injured, alone, in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness in November. The temperature outside was well below freezing, and it would be dark soon. Even if rescue teams were already searching for him, it could take days to find the crash site in this remote area. Marcus tried to use his cell phone, but there was no signal. The aircraft's emergency radio was sparking and obviously non-functional. He was completely cut off from the outside world. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Sterling was powerless. All his money, all his connections, all his influence meant nothing in this frozen wasteland. He was just another human being facing the basic challenge of survival. As darkness fell and the temperature continued to drop, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold, the distant howl of wolves. He was bleeding, immobilized, and completely defenseless in an environment where he was nothing more than potential prey. Marcus tried to pull his leg free from the debris, but the pain was excruciating, and he could feel himself growing weaker from blood loss. Hypothermia was setting in, and he realized with growing horror that he was probably going to die in this crashed jet, alone and forgotten. That's when he heard footsteps crunching through the snow outside the wreckage. "Hello? Is someone in there?" The voice was female, strong, and carried the unmistakable tone of authority that Marcus associated with military personnel. A moment later, a figure appeared at the gaping hole where the aircraft's door used to be. It was a woman in her late 30s, wearing military surplus clothing, a worn but warm winter coat, and carrying a backpack that looked like it contained survival gear. Her face was weathered but alert, and her eyes held the sharp focus of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. "Oh my God," she said, taking in the scene. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you injured?" "Yes," Marcus managed to say. "My leg is trapped and I think I'm bleeding." The woman immediately sprang into action with the efficiency of a trained professional. She climbed into the wreckage, assessed Marcus's condition with quick, sure movements, and began working to free his leg. "My name is Sarah," she said as she worked. "I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay calm and follow my instructions exactly. Can you do that?" Something about her voice, confident, competent, reassuring, made Marcus feel safer than he had since the crash. "Yes. Are you a paramedic?" "Former Army medic," Sarah replied, carefully lifting the piece of metal that had pinned Marcus's leg. "Among other things, this is going to hurt, but I need to get you mobile before hypothermia sets in." As Sarah worked to free him, Marcus studied her face in the dim light filtering through the wreckage. There was something familiar about her, but he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. "There," Sarah said, finally freeing Marcus's leg. "It's not broken, but you've got a nasty gash that needs attention. Can you put any weight on it?" Marcus tried to stand and immediately collapsed as pain shot through his leg. "I don't think so." "That's okay. I'm going to get you stabilized and then we'll work on getting out of here." Sarah opened her backpack and pulled out a first aid kit that looked far more comprehensive than anything Marcus had ever seen. As she cleaned and bandaged his wound with practiced skill, Marcus finally recognized her. "You're Sarah Wilson," he said quietly. Sarah paused in her work and looked at him directly for the first time. "Do we know each other?" Marcus felt a wave of shame wash over him as he remembered the job interview 6 months earlier. "You applied for a job at my company, Sterling Industries. I'm Marcus Sterling." Sarah's hands stopped moving for just a moment, and Marcus saw recognition dawn in her eyes. But instead of anger or recrimination, she simply nodded and continued working on his injury. "Small world," she said calmly. "Sarah, We can talk later," Sarah interrupted. "Right now we need to focus on keeping you alive. The temperature is dropping fast and this wreckage isn't going to provide adequate shelter for the night." Marcus was amazed by her professionalism. The woman he had dismissed as a charity case was now working with skill and determination to save his life, despite the fact that he had rejected her application without even giving her a chance. "Is there anyone else?" Sarah asked, looking around the wreckage. "The pilots? I don't know. I couldn't find them when I woke up." Sarah conducted a quick but thorough search of the aircraft in the immediate area. She returned with a grim expression. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "They didn't make it." Marcus felt a wave of grief and guilt. Captain Rodriguez had been flying for Sterling Industries for 8 years. He had a wife and 2 children, and now he was dead because Marcus had insisted on making this trip despite the weather warnings. "Hey," Sarah said, noticing Marcus's distress. "This isn't your fault. Accidents happen. Right now, I need you to focus on survival. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded, drawing strength from her calm determination. "Good. Here's what we're going to do. I have enough survival gear to keep us alive for several days, but we need to move to better shelter. There's a ranger station about 3 miles from here that should have supplies and a radio, but we're going to have to travel through some difficult terrain to get there." "I can't walk 3 miles on this leg." "You won't have to walk," Sarah said with a slight smile. "I'm going to build a sled and pull you. It's not going to be comfortable, but it'll get you there alive." Marcus stared at her in amazement. "You're going to pull me 3 miles through the snow?" "I've done harder things," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "In Afghanistan, I once carried a wounded soldier 6 miles through enemy territory to get him to a medevac site. Compared to that, this is a walk in the park." Over the next hour, Marcus watched in amazement as Sarah constructed an improvised sled, using pieces of the aircraft's interior, paracord from her pack, and her military ingenuity. She worked with the focused efficiency of someone who had been trained to handle life-or-death situations. "Where did you learn to do all this?" Marcus asked as she secured the sled's bindings. Army survival training, combat medic school, and 8 years of deployment in places where improvisation was the difference between life and death, Sarah replied. Plus, I've been living rough for the past year. You learn to make do with what you have. The reminder of Sarah's homelessness brought back Marcus's shame about how he had treated her application. Here was a woman with skills that could literally save lives, and he had dismissed her because she didn't have a permanent address. Sarah, about the job interview. Let's save the conversation for when we're somewhere warm, Sarah said, helping Marcus onto the sled. Right now we need to move. The weather's getting worse. The journey through the Alaskan wilderness was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Sarah pulled him across snow-covered terrain, through dense forest and over rocky outcroppings, never complaining, never stopping for more than a few minutes to check their direction or adjust their gear. Marcus, who was accustomed to being carried everywhere in luxury vehicles, private jets, and limousines, was now being pulled on a makeshift sled by a woman he had refused to hire because he considered her beneath his standards. "How are you doing this?" Marcus asked after the first hour. "You're pulling my weight plus the sled through snow and you're not even breathing hard." "Physical training," Sarah replied, "and motivation. I've been in worse situations." "Tell me about Afghanistan." Sarah was quiet for a moment as she navigated around a fallen tree. "What do you want to know? What was it like? What did you do there?" "I was a combat medic attached to a special operations unit. My job was to keep people alive in places where staying alive was a challenge. We did medical evacuation, provided care during firefights, and sometimes went behind enemy lines to treat wounded soldiers who couldn't be moved." Marcus tried to imagine the woman pulling his sled running into combat to save wounded soldiers. That sounds terrifying. It was. But it was also the most meaningful work I've ever done. When someone is bleeding out in the middle of a firefight, you don't think about fear. You just think about doing your job and getting them home alive. "Is that how you ended up?" Marcus struggled to find a tactful way to ask about her homelessness. "Homeless?" Sarah finished for him. "It's okay, you can say the word. It's not a disease." Marcus felt heat in his cheeks despite the cold. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." "It's a fair question. PTSD. After 8 years of deployment, I had trouble adjusting to civilian life. Loud noises, crowds, unexpected movements, they all triggered flashback responses. Most employers don't want to deal with that kind of liability. But you seem so capable, so in control." Sarah stopped pulling the sled and turned to look at him. "I am capable. PTSD doesn't make you incompetent, Mr. Sterling. It makes you hyper-vigilant and sometimes emotionally reactive. But it also means I can function in high-stress situations that would paralyze most people. Kind of like this one." Marcus realized that Sarah's combat experience and survival training were exactly why she was able to handle their current crisis with such calm competence. The very thing that had made him consider her unemployable was what was now saving his life. After 3 grueling hours, Sarah spotted the ranger station through the trees. It was a small log cabin with solar panels and a radio antenna, designed to house park service personnel during the winter months. "Thank God," Marcus breathed as Sarah pulled him up to the cabin's front porch. The station was unlocked, as most emergency shelters were in remote areas. Sarah quickly got Marcus inside and immediately began building a fire in the wood stove while he collapsed on a wooden chair, exhausted from the journey. Within minutes, Sarah had a roaring fire going and was checking Marcus's leg wound, which had reopened during the trip. "You're going to need stitches," she said, examining the gash. "Lucky for you, I know how to do field surgery." "Is there anything you don't know how to do?" Marcus asked, watching her work with medical supplies she had found in the ranger station's first aid kit. "I don't know how to build a billion-dollar business empire," Sarah replied with a slight smile as she prepared a suture needle. "This is going to hurt." As Sarah stitched his wound with steady hands, Marcus found himself studying her face. She was attractive in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or fashion. There was strength in her features, intelligence in her eyes, and a quiet confidence that came from facing genuine challenges and overcoming them. "Sarah," Marcus said as she finished bandaging his leg, "I owe you an apology." You don't owe me anything, Mr. Sterling. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, that's not true. Most people wouldn't have the skills to do what you've done tonight. And I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. Sarah sat back on her heels and looked at him directly. What exactly were you wrong about? Marcus took a deep breath. I thought homelessness meant you were lazy, unreliable, or had character flaws that made you unsuitable for employment. I thought people in your situation were there because they made bad choices and weren't willing to work hard enough to improve their circumstances. And now I realize that you're one of the most competent, resourceful, and hardworking people I've ever met. You've literally saved my life tonight, and you did it without hesitation, despite the fact that I treated you terribly. Sarah was quiet for a moment, stirring the fire with a poker. Do you want to know how I ended up homeless, Mr. Sterling? If you're comfortable telling me. When I came back from my last deployment, I had $50,000 in savings and a clean service record. I applied for dozens of jobs, security positions, medical technician roles, even entry-level office work. But every interview ended the same way. As soon as employers found out I had PTSD, they found reasons not to hire me. Sarah sat down across from Marcus, the firelight dancing across her face. PTSD is a disability protected under federal law, but that doesn't stop people from discriminating. They just get creative about their excuses. Not a good fit for company culture. Overqualified for the position. We've decided to go with another candidate. Marcus felt a growing sense of shame as he listened to her story. After 6 months of rejection, my savings ran out. I couldn't afford rent without income, so I ended up at the Veterans Transitional Housing Facility. It's a good program, but it's temporary. You can only stay for 6 months while you look for permanent housing and employment. What happened then? The 6 months expired and I still hadn't found a job, so I ended up on the streets. I've been living in my car when I can afford gas, in shelters when there's space available, and camping in the woods when there's no other option. Marcus realized that Sarah's homelessness wasn't the result of laziness or poor choices. It was the result of a society that didn't know how to value the skills and sacrifices of its veterans. How do you survive? He asked. The same way I survived in Afghanistan, one day at a time, using the skills I learned in the Army and helping other people when I can. There's a whole community of homeless veterans out here, Mr. Sterling. We look out for each other. Is that how you found me? You were camping in the area? Sarah nodded. I saw your plane go down. I've been tracking the crash site for hours, waiting for the smoke to clear enough to approach safely. Marcus stared at her in amazement. You've been out there in this weather, tracking a plane crash to help someone you didn't even know was inside? That's what we do, Sarah said simply. We help each other. The next morning, Sarah was able to get the ranger station's radio working and contact the Alaska State Troopers to report the crash and request rescue. Marcus watched her handle the radio communication with professional competence, providing precise coordinates, casualty reports, and logistical information. Roger that, State Troopers, Sarah said into the radio. We have one survivor with non-life-threatening injuries at the Pine Creek Ranger Station. The crash site is approximately 3 miles southwest of our current location. Be advised, there are 2 fatalities at the crash site. Copy that, ma'am. We have a rescue helicopter en route to your location. ETA approximately 2 hours. Can you confirm the survivor's condition? Affirmative. Laceration to the left leg, treated and sutured. No signs of concussion or internal injuries. Patient is stable and ambulatory with assistance. Excellent work, ma'am. Are you a medical professional? Former Army combat medic, Sarah replied. Outstanding. Please maintain radio contact until our arrival. After Sarah signed off, Marcus shook his head in wonder. You just handled that like you were still in the military. Some things you never forget, Sarah said, checking his bandages. How are you feeling? Physically? Much better, thanks to you. Emotionally, like I've been hit by a truck full of reality. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marcus struggled to find the words to express what he was feeling. Sarah, for the past 20 years, I've built my entire worldview around the idea that success equals worth, that poor people are poor because they deserve to be, and that people in difficult circumstances are there because of their own failings. And now I realize that I've been living in a bubble of privilege that made me completely blind to the reality of other people's lives. You're a war hero, a trained medic, a survival expert, and one of the most capable people I've ever met. And I dismissed you because you didn't have a permanent address. Sarah poured coffee from a pot she had found in the cabin's supplies. Mr. Sterling, do you know what the biggest difference is between you and me? Tell me. Luck. You were born into a family that could afford to send you to good schools. You grew up in safe neighborhoods with economic opportunities. You never had to worry about basic survival, so you could focus on building wealth and success. Sarah handed him a cup of coffee and continued. I grew up in foster care, joined the military to pay for college, and spent 8 years serving my country in war zones. When I came home with PTSD, I discovered that the country I fought for didn't know how to take care of its veterans. But you're so much stronger than I am, Marcus protested. You've handled this crisis better than I could handle a difficult business meeting. Strength isn't something you're born with, Mr. Sterling. It's something you develop by facing challenges and learning to overcome them. You've never had to develop the kind of strength I have because you've never needed it. Marcus considered this. So what happens now? When the rescue helicopter arrives, I go back to my billion-dollar empire, and you go back to… What? Living in your car? Sarah shrugged. I go back to survival mode, looking for work, looking for shelter, helping other people when I can. That's not right. It's reality. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Sarah, I want to offer you a job. Sarah looked at him skeptically. Guilt isn't a good foundation for employment, Mr. Sterling. This isn't guilt. This is recognition. I need someone with your skills, your integrity, and your perspective on my team. I'm offering you the security manager position you originally applied for, plus housing assistance and full benefits. Why? Because you've shown me that I've been measuring people by all the wrong criteria. I need someone who understands what real service looks like, who can see through the superficial markers of success to identify genuine character and capability. Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Mr. Sterling, do you know what my biggest fear is about accepting a job like that? Tell me. That I'll have a PTSD episode at work and you'll realize that hiring me was a mistake. That I'll embarrass you in front of your business associates, or that I'll lose control during a stressful situation. Marcus looked at the woman who had saved his life, built shelter, treated his injuries, and coordinated their rescue with calm professionalism. Sarah, I've seen you handle a life or death crisis with more composure than most of my executives show during quarterly reviews. If you can keep me alive in the Alaskan wilderness, I think you can handle whatever challenges a corporate environment might throw at you. The sound of the rescue helicopter arrived just as Marcus and Sarah were finishing their conversation. Sarah immediately went outside to signal the aircraft and guide it to a safe landing spot, while Marcus hobbled to the window to watch. The helicopter crew, 2 paramedics and a pilot, treated Sarah with obvious respect once they learned of her military background and medical training. Ma'am, we understand you provided medical treatment to the survivor? One of the paramedics asked. Affirmative. Cleaned and sutured a laceration, monitored for signs of shock and hypothermia. Patient is stable. The paramedic examined Marcus's leg and whistled in appreciation. This is excellent field work. You probably saved this man's life. As they prepared Marcus for transport to the hospital in Anchorage, he found himself watching Sarah with new eyes. The rescue crew treated her as a peer, a professional, someone whose judgment and skills they respected without question. It was a sharp contrast to how he had dismissed her months earlier. Sarah, Marcus said as they loaded him onto the helicopter, will you think about my offer? I'll think about it, she replied. Where can I reach you? Sarah gave him the address of the Veterans Service Center where she picked up mail. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus watched her standing in the snow outside the ranger station, and he realized that in the space of 24 hours, this woman had completely changed his understanding of courage, competence, and character. 3 days later, Marcus was released from the Anchorage hospital with a clean bill of health and strict instructions to stay off his injured leg for at least a week. Instead of flying immediately back to New York, he decided to stay in Alaska to attend the funerals of his pilots and to find Sarah Wilson. He located her at a veterans shelter downtown, where she was volunteering to help other homeless veterans navigate the complex bureaucracy of social services and benefits applications. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said with surprise when he walked into the shelter on crutches, "what are you doing here?" "Looking for you. We need to talk." Sarah finished helping an elderly veteran fill out paperwork and then walked with Marcus to a quiet corner of the shelter's common room. "I've been thinking about your job offer," she said, "and I have some questions. Ask me anything. If I have a PTSD episode at work, what happens? If I get triggered by something and have to step away from a meeting, will you fire me?" Marcus had spent the past 3 days researching PTSD, veterans issues, and workplace accommodations. "We'll work with you to identify potential triggers and develop coping strategies. If you need to step away from a situation, you step away. If you need accommodations, we'll provide them. Your mental health is not negotiable." Sarah studied his face. "What's changed, Mr. Sterling? 3 days ago you wouldn't hire me because I was homeless. Now you're offering accommodations for PTSD. What's changed is that I've learned the difference between liability and capability. Your PTSD is a result of serving your country in combat. It's not a character flaw, it's a service-connected condition that deserves respect and support. And the homelessness is a temporary circumstance that we're going to fix. I'm offering you a signing bonus sufficient to cover first and last month's rent on an apartment, plus a salary that will allow you to maintain stable housing." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you have any friends?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean people who care about you as a person, not as a business contact. People who would visit you in the hospital, who would worry about you if you went missing, who would mourn you if you died." Marcus thought about the 3 days he had spent in the hospital. His assistant had called to check on business matters. His accountant had called about insurance claims. His lawyers had called about liability issues. But no one had called simply because they cared about his well-being. "No," he admitted, "I don't think I do." "That's what I thought. Mr. Sterling, you've built a business empire, but you've never built relationships. You've accumulated wealth, but you've never accumulated people who genuinely care about you." "What does that have to do with the job offer?" Sarah leaned forward. "I'll take the job, but not just as your security manager. You need someone who will tell you the truth, who will challenge your assumptions, who will help you understand the difference between being successful and being a good human being." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. "You want to be my friend? I want to help you become the kind of person who deserves friends, the kind of person who sees value in other people beyond what they can do for him, the kind of person who understands that real wealth isn't measured in dollars." Marcus extended his hand to Sarah. "In that case, I accept your terms. When can you start?" Sarah shook his hand with a smile. "How about right now? There are 12 homeless veterans in this shelter who need jobs. Sterling Industries is going to help them find employment." 6 months later, Marcus Sterling stood before the board of directors of Sterling Industries, presenting a quarterly report unlike any in the company's history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "I'm pleased to report that our new Veterans Employment Initiative has exceeded all projections. We've hired 47 veterans across all divisions, and their performance ratings are consistently above average." Board member Janet Morrison raised her hand. "Marcus, while we appreciate the positive PR value of this program, are we sure these hires are based on merit rather than charity?" Sarah Wilson, now Sterling Industries Director of Human Resources and Veterans Affairs, stood up from her seat at the conference table. She was wearing a professional business suit, but she still carried herself with the confident bearing of a soldier. "Mrs. Morrison," Sarah said, "I'd like to address that concern. The veterans we've hired include former military police officers who've reduced our security incidents by 60%, combat medics who've enhanced our workplace safety programs, logistics specialists who've streamlined our supply chain operations, and communications experts who've improved our technology infrastructure. But surely there are challenges with PTSD and other service-related issues, another board member asked. There are, Sarah replied, just as there are challenges with any employee's personal circumstances. The difference is that we've implemented support systems, reasonable accommodations, and peer mentorship programs that benefit all employees, not just veterans. Marcus watched with pride as Sarah fielded questions from the board with the same competence she had shown in the Alaskan wilderness. Over the past 6 months, she had not only excelled in her role, but had fundamentally changed the culture of Storie Industries. The most significant change, Marcus continued his presentation, is not in our hiring practices, but in our understanding of what makes a valuable employee. We've learned that competence comes in many forms, that strength is often forged in adversity, and that the skills developed through service and sacrifice are exactly what our company needed. After the meeting, Marcus and Sarah walked through the Storie Industries headquarters, which now looked very different than it had a year earlier. The walls displayed photos of employee achievements, community service projects, and veteran recognition events. The atmosphere was warmer, more collaborative, more human. Sarah, Marcus said as they reached his office, I need to ask you something. What's that? Are we friends now? Real friends, Sarah smiled. Marcus, you saved my life by giving me a job and a purpose. I saved your life by pulling you out of a plane crash. I'd say we're more than friends and we're family. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. I never thought I wanted family. You never thought you deserved family. There's a difference. That evening, Marcus attended a barbecue at Sarah's apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom place she had been able to afford thanks to her Storie Industries salary. The gathering included several other veterans from the company, their families, and other friends from the local veterans community. As Marcus watched Sarah laugh with her friends, help a colleague's children with their homework, and effortlessly manage the social dynamics of the group, he realized how much his life had changed since their first meeting in the Alaskan wilderness. Marcus, Sarah called to him from across the patio, come help me with the grill. You need to learn how to cook something that doesn't require a team of chefs. As Marcus joined Sarah at the grill, surrounded by people who had accepted him not because of his wealth but because of his willingness to change, he understood that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life, without knowing it. Genuine human connection. Sarah, he said as he watched her flip burgers with the same competent precision she brought to everything else. Thank you. For what? For saving my life? Both times. Sarah looked at him with the warm smile that had become so familiar and precious to him. Marcus, the best part about saving someone's life is that you get to watch them live it better. And you're definitely living better. We both are, Marcus said, looking around at the gathering of friends, colleagues, and chosen family. We both are. 2 years after the plane crash, Marcus Storie stood at the podium of the National Veteran Service Award ceremony in Washington, D.C., preparing to accept the Corporate Leadership Award for Storie Industries' innovative veterans employment programs. But instead of giving a typical acceptance speech about corporate responsibility, Marcus told a different story. 2 years ago, he began, I was a man who measured everyone's worth by their economic status, their housing situation, and their perceived usefulness to my business empire. I was also a man who almost died alone in the Alaskan wilderness because I was too arrogant to recognize real value when it was offered to me. Marcus looked out at the audience of veterans, service members, and advocates. The woman who saved my life, Sarah Wilson, had applied for a job at my company 6 months before our paths crossed again. I rejected her application because she was homeless. I couldn't see past her circumstances to recognize her extraordinary capabilities, her unshakable integrity, and her unwavering commitment to service. He paused, finding Sarah in the audience. She was sitting with other Storie Industries employees, wearing her dress uniform with the medals she had earned in Afghanistan. Sarah taught me that real strength isn't the power to control others, it's the courage to serve them. Real wealth isn't what you accumulate for yourself, it's what you contribute to your community. And real success isn't measured by the height of your tower, It's measured by the number of people you lift up along the way. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. Today, Sterling Industries employs over 200 veterans across all our divisions. We've partnered with homeless shelters, PTSD treatment centers, and job training programs. We've learned that when you invest in people who have already proven their commitment to something greater than themselves, you don't just get better employees, you become a better company. The audience erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. This award belongs to Sarah Wilson and every veteran who has served our country and then continued to serve their communities despite facing challenges that would break lesser people. It belongs to every person who has been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed because society couldn't see their true value. Marcus stepped away from the podium and walked to where Sarah was sitting. "Sarah Wilson, would you join me up here?" As Sarah made her way to the stage, Marcus continued speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my friend, my colleague, and the woman who taught me what it really means to serve. She saved my life, changed my company, and showed me that the most valuable people are often the ones society values least." Sarah joined Marcus at the podium, and he handed her the award. "This belongs to you and everyone like you who never gave up, even when the world gave up on you." As Sarah accepted the award, she spoke into the microphone with the clear, strong voice that Marcus had first heard in the wreckage of his plane. "Thank you, Marcus, but I need everyone to understand something. I didn't save Marcus Sterling's life because I'm a hero. I saved his life because that's what we do. We take care of each other. Every veteran in this room has made the same choice at some point, to put someone else's welfare ahead of their own." Sarah looked directly at Marcus. "And Marcus didn't hire me because he felt guilty. He hired me because he learned to recognize that service, sacrifice, and resilience are the qualities that make organizations stronger, communities safer, and societies more compassionate." She turned back to the audience. "The real award today is the reminder that all of us, veterans and civilians, employers and job seekers, people with homes and people without them, have more value than our circumstances might suggest. We all have something to offer, and we all deserve the chance to prove it." The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Marcus barely heard it. He was thinking about how different his life had become since that night in Alaska, when he learned that sometimes the person who saves you is the same person you never thought was worth saving. After the ceremony, as Marcus and Sarah flew back to New York on Sterling Industries' new, safer corporate jet, Sarah asked him a question that had become their tradition. "So, Marcus, what did you learn today?" Marcus smiled, looking out at the clouds below. "I learned that 2 years ago I thought I was flying high because I was successful, but I was actually crashing because I was alone. Today I'm still flying high, but now I'm not alone anymore." "And what's the difference?" "The difference," Marcus said, "is that success without service is just selfishness. But service with success, that's how you change the world." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Now you're getting it." As their plane flew through the clear evening sky, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of crisis had led to a lifetime of purpose. Sometimes it takes losing everything you think you want to discover everything you actually need. And sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you once thought was worthless. But more often than not, it's the people we overlook who have the most to teach us about courage, resilience, and what it truly means to be valuable. What do you think? Have you ever misjudged someone based on their circumstances? Do you believe that crisis can reveal people's true character? Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.